Welcome everyone. Happy Saturday, where whatever day you're joining us on. Happy that day too, I guess. I'm Claire Jones. I am a queer fantasy romance author as well as a small publisher that supports other writers in getting their works shared with the world. And we are jumping on for my Marketing as Authors podcast, where I interview the amazing and inspiring authors in my network to discuss the marketing strategies that have propelled our writing careers forward in meaningful ways. It's actually the most common question that I get from aspiring writers as well as published authors is how to do the marketing thing. So that's exactly why I started this podcast because there's no one way to do it, which is part of what these interviews explore. So if you're joining us, please like, comment, share below. Let us know that you're here. And today I'm talking to Jason, who I found in the world of TikTok. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok is a wonderful place. When I found the world of book talk, I was like, oh my God, my people.
I discovered it a few years ago and sort of jumped in with both feet, and things worked out well there, and I enjoy it. I post just about every day there.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think I take a break on the weekends, but it's pretty
Mhm.
much every day for me as well.
Yeah, I do sometimes have some days that I don't post either because I'm just not feeling it or because I've gotten overwhelmed with other stuff. But I sometimes try to sort of batch record so I have some things in my drafts. So if there's a day that I can't really put something new together, I'll have something sitting there that I can just be like, all right, have this, and just sort of throw it at TikTok.
Yeah, yeah, that's easy. I cannot for the life of me do batch content when it comes to videos. I can do it when it comes to writing, but for some reason I cannot do it with videos.
Yeah, we could borrow from each other's traits, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's part of this podcast too is just deciding what works best for you as you go about creating marketing content, engaging with marketing strategies and stuff like that. Because we don't want to force ourselves to do things outside of our zone of genius too.
Right. That's exactly right. And I do a lot of content on TikTok that's about the craft and the business of writing and publishing. And I always emphasize when I'm doing that it doesn't work the same way for everybody. And
Hmm.
when you hear advice to just, it's something to try. It's not something that's guaranteed to work. And you try it, and if it doesn't work, then you try something else. But if it does work, then you found something.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, first off, give us a rundown of your books. Like, what are they? How many have you written? And what do you have planned for the future?
Sure. I'm Jason Dorough, and I write primarily epic fantasy. My series that I'm working on is called Teshavar, and the series is sort of a gaslamp fantasy setting, but it's a secondary world, so it's not actually Victorian Earth, but it's a kind of a combination of Victorian mixed with a little bit of medieval aesthetic. And the first book in the series is Akithar's Greatest Trick, and it's a book as a story about the most famous stage magician in a realm where real magic is outlawed.
Wow.
And yeah, I have three books out so far in the series. I have Akathar's Greatest Trick, and its sequel is Lysandra's Deepest Fear. And then there's a prequel novella called The Gem of Tagath. And the next book that I release, which I'm working on now, will complete the first trilogy, but it's planned to be a trilogy of trilogies with some novellas and side stories, things like that. So it's a pretty big undertaking. But in addition to that, I am also working on a long-term project that is a standalone. It's going to be a Viking retelling of Macbeth,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, so I've got that and some other ideas percolating. But the Teshavar series is my main focal point, the thing that I'm pouring most of my brain power into.
Yeah, describe for me the trilogy of trilogies. Does that mean nine books total?
Yeah, it is the way that I have planned it out, and I've actually semi-outlined everything already from the very beginning. It's an overall epic story that has a huge arc to it, but the arc itself has sort of three arcs within it. It's essentially a beginning, middle, and end to it, and then each of those is made of three books. So you can, in theory, if you wanted to, you could read one of the trilogies and just be done
Mm.
with it.
Mm.
But if you want to get the whole story, it's a trilogy of trilogies, so nine books in all. And then there will be, like, I have the prequel novella out, and there will be some other sort of side stories that are supplementary that you can fill in parts of the world building, parts of characters' backstories, those sorts of things.
Where did you get that idea from? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, as far as the story itself, the idea of the world, and really the first that came to me, the idea of the primary antagonist came to me really about 10 years before I even started writing it, and
Mm,
it was just percolating for a long time, and I was
wow.
figuring out the best way to put the story together, and I figured out that in order to structure it the way that I wanted to, I'm a very process oriented person. I have to
Hmm.
outline everything before I write it,
Hmm.
and so I figured out that it needed to be that structure, and then after I figured that out, I was sort of looking around and realized that similar to what Brandon Sanderson has done with his
Mm,
Mistborn books, that he has
mm,
different eras of Mistborn,
mm.
and he has like the first trilogy, and then there's a second era that I think is 3 or 4 books, and I believe he's planning a third one as well. So it sort of coincidentally sort of matched up with that. But
Interesting.
it was, yeah, it was it's going to be a big story, and that was the best way I could think of to sort of segment it and sort of break the story down.
Yeah, so you're definitely a plotter, not a pantser.
Absolutely. I feel like it's sort of a spectrum and nobody is fully one or the other
Yes,
because
very true.
even when we're outlining, at the time that we are outlining, we have to do some pantsing in the outlining process. And similarly, people who sort of write it on the fly and just pants the whole thing, at the end when they're editing, they kind of have to figure out the structure in order to make everything work. So that's a little bit of plotting at that point or outlining.
Yeah.
But on that spectrum, I'm definitely way on the outlining side of it.
Yeah, I actually call myself a plantser
I like that.
because actually it depends on genre for me. Like for fiction, I tend more towards pantsing. For nonfiction, I tend more towards plotting, which makes sense in the long term.
Yeah, yeah, that
But
makes total sense.
but I do still have to have some sort of skeleton plot structure when I am writing fiction. Like I have the idea, I actually create the movie in my head before I start writing. And so I have the idea of what the scenes and narrative arcs are going to be. But as I write, I can't do like jumping around in chapter writing. Like that drives me insane.
Yeah, I one thing that I do that I didn't do with my first book, but I started with the second one is my books all are multi POV, and it's a lot of different POVs,
Oh, wow.
like 9 to 10 characters have POVs
Wow.
throughout, and I'll show you how big the books end up being. Here's one of my books here
Yeah.
that is like
Yeah.
that big. But something that I started doing with the second book that really helps is I will start with one character's POV and write their whole story through to the end, and then I go
Mm.
back and write another character's through as far as I can go,
Oh, interesting.
and then I interweave it. But I've been able to do that because I've outlined it ahead of time.
Sure.
But that keeps me into a specific character's voice all the way through the book, and
Yeah.
then I can reset into another character.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because one of my most difficult or challenging pieces of writing is dialogue because you have to
Mhm.
head switch between the two or three or four multiple characters that you have in the dialogue scene. And I always wondered how people did multi POV, especially when you have that many POV.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that George R. R. Martin does that as well. He
Mm,
very much is a pantser. He calls it a gardener, but so he amazingly doesn't plan anything ahead of time. He has these
wow.
hugely intricate plots, but I've heard that he takes one character and goes through their whole story for the book, and then takes another character and then sort
Wow.
of interweaves those in the editing process.
Wow. How do you choose what character to start with?
Um, as far as starting it, really, I have more of a process for choosing which character gets the POV in a scene, really, and that's
Mm,
really if I have like multiple POV characters that are in a scene together, I will always choose the character who has the most to lose in that scene because that's the character that has the most stakes and will pull the reader
huh.
in more for that. And
Interesting.
for deciding the order that the scenes go, usually it's pretty chronological, but sometimes it's a little out of order. I will try to sort of map it out so that characters get kind of equal rotation time. And I
Mm,
even will have I use plotter software to do that. It's
yeah.
PLOTTR, and I will have each of the character POVs planned out on a timeline so I can see, okay, this character hasn't had a chapter in like the last 3 chapters, so I'll bring
Mm.
them back in and can kind of shift that around, but it mostly stays chronological, so I just try to work out the POVs that way.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest challenges I see when it comes to books that have that many POVs is how do you emotionally engage the reader in all of those different POVs? And it
Yeah.
seems like you use that high stakes emotion thread there.
Right, right. Yeah, I try to. I think of every character when I'm writing them as if that character is the central one protagonist for the
Mm,
story, and I try not to give anybody else greater weight. It's kind of funny when someone asks me something about my main character or my protagonist. I never know what to say because I give
mm,
equal weight to all the characters, including the villains, and they get their own POVs and chapters and everything. So it's really an ensemble kind of thing, and they sometimes their stories will diverge to different parts of the world, then they'll come back together for things, and so yeah, it all ties together. But I try to keep the emotional ebb and flow going for all of them.
interesting. And so, because these books are so big, do you self-pub?
I do. I do that, and I went through a whole process. When I first started writing, I'd finished my first book and had fully intended to try to do traditional publishing because I
Hmm.
didn't know anything else at that time.
Hmm.
And I'm the type of person who wants to learn everything I can about something before I do it.
Mm.
So after finishing that first book, I started learning. I started taking classes online, started doing everything I could to learn about the business of publishing. And in the process of doing that, I realized I didn't want to be traditionally published. I
Yeah.
wanted to go the indie route. And so that's what I did. I went just full steam ahead into that. I never queried any agents or anything,
Okay.
and just went fully into it. I have been offered contracts for traditional publishing in the past after I had indie published all this, but have turned those down because
Mm.
I just haven't seen anything for me and what my goals are that traditional could offer me that I'm not already doing with indie. So.
Mm. So, what are the goals?
The main goal that I have is really it's kind of funny. Like I of course want to have a good career with it, make money with it, all of that. But at the heart of it is a love for storytelling, which is what
Mm.
I've always had all my life. I have since I was little playing with toys. I would make up these stories and have these elaborate character arcs with my action figures and all this stuff. And so the goal is really being able to tell stories that will engage people and inspire people and to really just get that out there while
Mm.
also trying to monetize it and trying to make something off of it that can help support me in this sort of capitalist world that we're in. But
Yeah.
yeah, but the goal is really the storytelling itself. So I could foresee if I came to a traditional publisher or an agent with this giant epic fantasy story that I wanted
Yeah.
to do as a first time writer,
Yeah.
I would have gotten laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I wouldn't have had the creative control over covers, over when I want to release audiobooks, over just all these things. And so maintaining that control so that I can tell the stories I want in the way I want to tell them, that's the primary goal for me.
I mean, I see that all the time when, especially people who are writing epic fantasy, they tend to be big manuscripts, like 250,000 word manuscripts,
Yep,
if
yep.
not more. And that is very hard to sell to TradPub. Like, they don't want to take a chance on that big of a manuscript, especially if it is a debut author. And so
Mhm.
I was wondering what your particular experience with that was, but
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of funny. I had already decided that I liked the indie route more than I liked traditional after I had learned about it, and had pretty much already decided to go indie. But then when I started thinking about the links of the books, I was like, yeah, it's probably good I decided to do that.
yeah, yeah,
The most recent book that I released, Lysandra's Deepest Fear, it's around 270,000 words,
yeah.
and I like to release in both paperback and hardcover. And when I started to do the hardcover, I couldn't get KDP to print it. They don't make books
Huh.
as big as that is, so I had to go specifically with Ingram Spark to print all the
Wow.
hardcovers for that one.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's why I talk so much about starting with your goal as an author and as a writer and with the goal in mind, because that's going to inform every step along the way. It's going to inform how you edit the book, it's going to inform how you publish and how you market. And I
Mhm.
don't think people start with that goal in mind. They kind of like rush to the end, like that publish button on KDP.
Right,
And then
right.
they're like, oh, whoops.
Yeah, I had so much fear about publishing the first time. I just the way my mind works, the way my brain works, the way I worry. I wanted for everything to be perfect. I wanted to. I didn't necessarily expect for it to be like a huge debut to sell a ton of books and for like that kind of thing to happen. But I wanted for, and I still want for anything I publish to be as good of a product as I can possibly put out there,
Mm,
and to have it edited as well as I can have to have the cover look amazing, to have like everything as great a product as I can. And so every time, but especially that first time when you go to hit the publish button, I remember sitting there just agonizing, and I wasn't in a rush at all. And after I hit it, I remember I didn't sleep at all that night. I was like thinking of all the things that I'd done wrong possibly, and like getting myself just all worked up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I get it. I get it. So let's back up a little bit and talk about what led you to the writing career. Was this a natural move for you, or was it like a 180?
Yeah, so all my life, like I said, I've been into storytelling, and when I was little, when I was growing up, I grew up reading. Funnily enough, I was reading like British mysteries, like Agatha
Mm.
Christie, like
Mm.
Dorothy Sayers, Marjorie Allingham, all this stuff. I was like this little kid toting around these British books, and so. When I was a kid, I wanted to write, but I thought I was going to be like I was this little American kid thinking I was going to be a British mystery writer. So I was writing those kinds of stories from the time I was really young. And then when I went to college, I went to Georgia Tech, and I am also interested in technology. So I majored in computer science there. And it really just kind of being there kind of temporarily squashed all the creativity out of me. And I didn't write for a long time. But after I got out of college, I started gravitating more towards speculative fiction and got
Mm.
more into sci-fi, fantasy, those sorts of things. And the ideas that I was having were more in the fantasy area. And so I started playing with ideas, and it took a long time for me to really get serious about it. But then it was 2018 that I started writing Akithar's Greatest Trick. And once I started doing that, the story just all came together, and I felt like I had something really good that people would enjoy reading. And that was when I was like, well, I need to either do this or not do this. I don't have infinite time. And if
Mm.
I get to the end of my life and I haven't tried to publish a book, I know that's something I'm going to regret.
Mm.
And so I just sort of went all in at that point on learning about publishing, learning about all this stuff. And it wasn't until let's see, the book actually published in 2021, and I believe it was January of 2022 that I went on to TikTok for the first time
Mm.
and started all that. So I've been growing my readership since then, and sort of just barreling full speed ahead at that point.
Yeah, that's so funny that TikTok came after publishing, because for me, TikTok came before publishing.
I think that's how it usually is for most people. It was really funny because I wrote the book, and I have never been good prior to that with any kind of social media stuff. I've tried promoting different things. I also work as a voiceover artist, and I have tried promoting that on social media, different things, and I never made anything come together. And so I hadn't even thought about the social media thing. I was just focused on writing the book. And
Hmm.
after I finished writing it, a friend of mine said, "You should really look at TikTok because there's
Yeah.
this big book talk thing on there." And I was like, "Isn't that the app where people like dance and stuff?"
Yeah,
And,
right.
and so I had no idea. And then I checked it out, and I was like, well, I'll try this. And so I signed up and put just like a video or two up. And really quickly it caught on. I was very fortunate. The algorithm was kind to me at the beginning, and
Mhm.
I picked up a following pretty quickly on there and was able to build a community. And so yeah, the TikTok came after the writing for me.
Yeah, I was recommended. I did not was not an early adopter of TikTok either, and I think it was the end of 2021 that I found TikTok, and it was somebody that was like, you should go check it out at least, just try it.
Yeah.
And then I found Book Talk, and I was like, oh my God, my people! I wish I'd known you when I was 10. Where have you been my entire life?
Exactly.
Oh, I was like, all of these people were reading amazing books, writing amazing books, and I was like, I need to be a part of that, obviously. Please and thank you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Typically, I mean, sometimes it has its rough edges, but typically, Book Talk is a very welcoming community for new
Yeah.
folks trying to get into it. And I feel very fortunate myself because it can be. There have been a lot of instances that I've seen myself and that I've heard about when a cis guy comes
Mm.
onto Book Talk that sometimes they're not there with the best of intentions, and
Yeah.
I feel very fortunate that I was welcomed in when I was because I would not have blamed the mostly non-cis male population there of just kicking me straight out.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that I was able to fit in there and find my place.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all do have a place of the internet where we can feel comfortable as authors.
Hmm.
And it may or may not be Book Talk for you. It may or may not be Reddit for you. It
Hmm.
may or may not be Tumblr for you. And I think that's what I try to explain to there. I run into a lot of authors who are either dismissive or scared of social media because
Hmm.
of mostly because of their own hangups.
Yep, yep.
And I'm like, all right, you don't have to be a YouTube star here. Like, I'm not asking you to try to be a YouTube star. I'm not trying to ask you to be a dancing TikTok star either. But I will promise you that there is a corner of the internet where you will not only feel welcomed, but comfortable in how you present your content to that corner.
Hmm. Exactly. I agree. And I think that it helped me a lot to have a background in voiceover work when I
Mm,
came onto it because I was used to presenting and talking and being able to verbalize things. I wasn't used to being on camera and having my face on camera. So
yeah.
that took a little bit of getting used to. But I think having that voiceover background did help me to an extent with sort of easing into things. And most of the videos that I make on there are talking videos. You can find success on there with all kinds of videos. You don't
Yes.
have to show your face, you don't have to talk.
Yes.
uh, for me, it's easier too, just because that's the strength that I have. But I've seen a lot of people that can have their careers blow up just from posting a picture of their book with some text over it, and that works perfectly for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Excerpt videos are huge on
Yeah.
TikTok. Like, you
Yep.
don't even have to talk, let alone show your face.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I've been experimenting with different types of things, and it always comes back to the face content, as a
Mm,
lot of people call it, is what tends to work best for me. And it's kind of funny, and I know you and I talked about this off the podcast when we were talking about whether I should come on the show, and I was a little
mm,
bit hesitant because
mm,
I feel like with my marketing, I feel like I sort of as a brand myself, my identity has gotten marketed better than my books have on there.
mm,
People typically on Book Talk will know me because I make specific types of videos and will interact in a specific way and have a community around me. But of those people, I don't think a huge percentage of them have actually read the stuff that I've written. I mean, a lot of them
mm,
have. I know I have a lot of readers on there and a lot of people that interact, but I feel like my personal branding has sort of been more successful than my specific book branding.
mm. Yeah, and I love that you bring that up because I actually try to explain that to people is like the importance of an author brand versus a book brand because people do want their entirety of their marketing strategies to be focused on the book because that's the thing that makes money, right?
Mhm.
But there is also great value in building that long-term author brand over time because that's where you have your team of cheerleaders that are going to show up for you in different ways beyond just that one book.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I've seen a lot of people, it's always first-time authors who are working on a specific book who will set up their profile and their profile name will be the specific book they're working
Yeah.
on or even the series they're working on, which I see the logical flow of that. That makes perfect
Yes.
sense to me. But I always encourage people not to do that, to brand it from their author name, from their pen name, or whatever name they're going to publish with, because they will hopefully write more books beyond that, and they'll need to
Hmm.
carry their audience past that into the
Yes.
future. And so if they're just branded with this one book or this one series, that kind of locks them in and limits them a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it also contributes to the whole like cardboard cutout brand thing that
Mhm.
we see is like, I am not a real human being. I am one dimensional, like
Yeah, yeah.
if you have a multi-dimensional, multifaceted author brand, it honestly makes people trust you more too,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
you're like, oh, it is a fellow human. Hello, fellow human.
Exactly. And I have seen a lot of talk, and I've thought about it a lot myself about having multiple pen names for specific things. I
Yeah.
don't use a pen name myself. This is just my name that I publish under, and I haven't published under anything else. But I've thought about whether, like, I know a lot of people like to publish different books in different genres under different pen names. Like, they'll have one pen name that's for thrillers, they'll have one that's for
Hmm.
sci-fi, they'll have one that's for romance. And one thing that I've been thinking about is I do have ideas outside of fantasy that I want to write. Like I'd like to write eventually maybe some sci-fi, some horror, some different things like that. And I feel like in my case, because I am known by my name more so than my books are known, that it might be of benefit to me to just stick with the one name as I'm publishing these different things.
Yeah, yeah. I feel the same way. I have a very I write multi-genre and I have a
Mhm.
very multifaceted author brand as a result. I have founded four businesses over the last 11 years, and I've honestly struggled with finding a branding presence that I could s sustainably stand behind as
Yeah.
myself and sustainably promote as myself. And it wasn't until I built that, um, what's the word that I'm looking for? Comprehensive author brand that combined all of the pieces of myself that I truly felt comfortable promoting that brand because it
Right.
was integrative. It wasn't like me trying to act as the persona of a brand that I had created. It's just me being the weirdo, multifaceted creative that I am out there in the world. And it's honestly made my marketing a whole lot easier as a result because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually enjoy being myself. What a concept.
Yeah, that's I know there are some authors who enjoy sort of creating a character around their persona,
Sure.
and they can portray that and do that, but I know that's not something that I could really do myself, that
Yeah.
I come on and I just sort of talk in my own voice. Even when I'm doing my voiceover work, I don't do typically character voice work. I usually do like corporate stuff where it's
Mm.
doing advertisements, doing training videos, announcements at airports, that sort of thing. I just use my own voice for that, and I don't play a part. I don't play a role.
Hmm.
So doing that, just having that sort of authenticity, having that sort of openness with my brand makes it so much easier that I can just sit down and start recording, or I
Yes.
can type a message up on Threads. And sometimes I have to be careful not to get too much into my opinions of things, because there has to be some kind of a little separation between the business and the personal. But still, I try to be as authentic as I can and as real as I can to who I actually am when I'm broadcasting myself out there.
Yeah, and myself am a mutable creative too. Like I flow from one idea, one passion to another as well. And so I also needed a brand that could hold that space for that. Like
Mhm.
I get bored if I focus on one topic all the time. And
Yeah.
so I needed to build a brand presence that could hold space for my different interests, different passions. Like, for example, right now, I've gotten really deep into the mutual aid space because that's just what I've been feeling right now with the current state of things. And so
Yeah.
most of my social media presence has been transferred over to talking about mutual aid and resources and network and community and that kind of stuff. And my brand supports that. And so
That's
I'm
great.
not diluting my brand presence by taking these side roads, but I'm still having a comprehensive branding strategy as a result. And for me, that just works a lot better than being one topic, one focus, one book.
Yeah, yeah, and it's more interesting to people who follow you probably as well, that they get to see sort of the full all facets of you, instead of just, oh, I like this one book and that's all I'm going to see on the social media. They like seeing the different aspects of you.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, my most popular content is face forward content, especially when I'm like philosophizing on things. Like, I don't know why that's the content that does the best. It's not like marketing. I would want it to be the like promo marketing content that
Yeah.
does the best. That's honestly what we're all aiming for. But at the end of the day, it's when I come on, I'm like, so I've been thinking. Let me tell you about these thoughts that I've been having. And then people are like, yeah, those are interesting thoughts. And I'm like, well, thank you for validating that. And would you like to buy my book?
Yeah, you got to slip that little promo in, right?
So, what has worked for you and what hasn't? We've talked a little bit about that so far, but did you decide going straight out of the bat that you were going to approach it with one particular strategy, or you kind of experimented, it sounds like?
Yeah, I experimented, and like I was saying before, I like to learn about things before I start doing them. So in addition to learning about publishing, learning about all of that kind of stuff, I also took some online marketing classes
Hmm.
specifically about book marketing, and I took the course that I forget what it's called now. It used to be the Mark Dawson course
Hmm.
on advertising, and then he kind of disappeared, and I'm not sure what it's called now. But I took a bunch of courses with that, and then I started experimenting with stuff after I published. And I've tried like everything I can think of. I've done paid ads on Amazon, paid
Hmm.
ads on Facebook. I've done Instagram. I've done newsletters, newsletter swaps, like all this stuff. none of that has worked for me. And I don't know if it's my way of executing on it or what, but none of that landed for me. It wasn't until I came to TikTok and started doing the straightforward social media stuff that I really started getting traction at that point. And I started building a community of readers, a community of people wanting to support me. And so for me, I tried a whole lot of things, and it was really the social media side of things, specifically when I could directly talk to people on video, that
Mm,
people started connecting with me. And I still feel like there's something that I could do to make things like ads work, to make more traditional kinds of marketing exercises work. I don't know specifically what it is, but that's something that I'm still trying to learn and trying to sort of hone.
mm,
So it was sort of a thing of trying all kinds of things, and then this is the thing that worked.
So which video content platforms do you utilize? TikTok, obviously.
Right. TikTok is the primary one. That's where I have my biggest following, and it's where I post all the videos that I make. Any video that I make will go onto TikTok. And then, depending on what the video is, what the type of content is, if it's just like a silly trending audio video, I will stay on TikTok. That's the only
Mm,
place I'll put that. If it's something that's more informational, that's me talking about some aspect of publishing or something like that, I will typically repurpose it, also put it on Instagram, and
mm,
I have started also putting stuff more recently on YouTube.
mm,
A lot of times they'll go up as YouTube shorts because they're coming from TikTok. They'll be shorter than 3 minutes, but sometimes they'll be longer and they'll be just regular videos on YouTube. So TikTok is the main one. That's sort of the catch-all that gets everything. It gets like the fire hose of my content.
mhm,
And then the stuff that is more repurposable goes from there on to Instagram and or YouTube.
mm. Have you been trying Red Note at all?
I looked at Red Note when everything happened, when TikTok was going to go away, and I went on there and I couldn't quite figure it out myself. I played around with it a little bit, but I haven't really done anything there.
Yeah, I've been diversifying. I kind of call it the great social media experiment of 2025
Uh-huh.
because of all the stuff that was going on at the beginning of the year. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
I need to like come up with like plan B, C, D, E, F, and G if
Yep. Yep.
TikTok is being taken away. And so I was always posting to TikTok, but I also tried the Lemonade. I also tried Red Note, Tumblr, and Blue Sky. Those are the ones that I've
Okay.
been experimenting on. Lemonade dropped out of the running real quick because it also went dead the day that TikTok went dead. And so
Yeah.
I don't know why they're pushing it as a TikTok alternative right
I was thinking
now.
about that beforehand. I was like, if one goes down, they're gonna all go down from ByteDance.
Yeah.
So,
And the strangest thing is that I get a ton of followers on Lemonade, but zero engagement.
oh, okay.
And so I don't know where the followers are actually coming from. And so that is a little suspicious.
Yeah. Do you think they might be bots, or do you think?
I think they're feeding from like all of the Lemonade promotion that they've been doing on
Oh,
TikTok, you know what I mean? And so
yeah.
I don't think people are actually coming over to Lemonade to engage
Right.
from the TikTok pushes that they're doing. I don't know. That's my best working theory.
Yeah.
Um, Tumblr, I tried because I'm a big Tumblr personal user. I've been a
Okay.
Tumblrina, I guess is the term, since like 2010-ish. Like it's been a while, but
Yeah.
I just couldn't make it work for an author brand. Like even though I wasn't really doing promotional content, but
Mhm. Yeah.
that also fell out of the running, but Red Note has been working very well for me. I've been going
Interesting.
viral on Red Note when my engagement on TikTok hasn't been doing as well, which has been very interesting so far.
That's interesting. Yeah, I tried it out. Like I said, I couldn't quite figure it out because the algorithm wasn't leaning towards book stuff for me, and I was getting
Yeah.
a lot of stuff that wasn't pertinent to me. But I have a friend who started out as a reader and has become a friend since then. That she was really pushing me on Red Note and trying to get me to try it and everything, and I didn't really go into it. But I think she's still on there and doing a lot of stuff. So I could check that out again.
Yeah,
I
the book community definitely isn't as strong on Red Note as it
okay.
is on
Yeah.
TikTok, but I think the content that does do well on Red Note is like book adjacent content, like more conceptual content of thoughts and ideas and stuff that are related to the stuff that I write.
Okay, that makes sense. And I also do outside of the video content, I also do post a lot on it's a meta platform, so I feel kind of weird about it, but I'm on Threads a lot and have
Mm-hmm.
gotten a lot of traction there. And I've tried Blue Sky, and it's weird. Blue Sky, I sort of post the same kinds of things on Blue Sky that I do on Threads. On Threads, I'll post and I'll get a ton of interaction. I'll get a ton of shares and all this kind of stuff. And then when I posted on Blue Sky, it's like crickets. It's like I'm just yelling into an empty room. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how it works out for different people.
Yeah, it's honestly a hashtag strategy on Blue Sky that I've discovered, and it's using the book's authors and writers hashtags that have done the best for me. Also, collaborative content. So I went to the San Francisco Writers Conference earlier this year, and all of my conference content did very well. And
Huh.
so it's interesting. I think it's a great platform for connecting with other authors and writers in particular, but not necessarily readers.
Okay. I've found a lot of that exact thing on pretty much all my social media because a lot of the content that I make, I it's kind of funny when an author just in general goes onto social media, you can sort of make a choice to lean heavily into talking specifically about your books
Yes.
or about what you're doing, like the
Hmm.
craft and business and everything of writing, which some readers find that interesting. I found that a lot of readers find that interesting, but it's stuff that speaks well to other authors. And
Hmm.
so I started doing that because that's the stuff that I enjoy talking about. I like
Same.
talking about the craft and sharing what I'm doing. And a lot of my friends were saying, you don't need to be doing this. You shouldn't be talking to this because you need to be talking directly to readers. But over time, I realized that all the authors are also readers. And
Yes.
so I would be interested to see sort of the breakdown. But I think because of that, a pretty big portion of my reader base is probably authors.
Yes,
So,
yes.
yeah.
It's so funny because I've been in the business space for so long, a large part of my audience is like business people.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny when I'm talking about romance books with like accountants and lawyers and like
Yeah.
bookkeepers and all of these like serious buttoned up professionals. And I'm like, all right, what kind of smut do you like?
They aspire to billionaire romance, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I'm like, because they're like, well, what would you recommend? And I'm like, girl, there is a whole broad range. Like, you have to tell me what your flavor is first before I give you a recommendation. Because you want like vampire foursome or do you want like billionaire cowboy? Like, you have to give me some type of clue here.
I love that. I wish that for the type of books that I write, I wish that I could as easily just have like text works. Like I can say it has found family in it. I can say it's like
Sure.
gaslamp fantasy, but those aren't as like powerful like trope kind of tags as you can have in romance. And so a lot of times I'm kind of envious of being able to just shout out, "Yeah, I've got like this cowboy story. I've got this
Yeah.
whatever."
Yeah. I mean, romance is a billion-dollar industry, so it's hard to,
Yep.
it's a behemoth.
It is. It is. It is really. If I wrote romance, I feel like I would have a lot of anxiety just because of how big the potential is there. I
Mm,
feel like I would sort of feel the weight of the that overall genre on me. By writing fantasy, it's like there are a lot of fantasy readers, but it's not romantic fantasy. That right? There is
yeah.
romance in the books and
Yeah.
everything, but it's not like that thing that I just put it out there and everybody swarms to it. It's a thing that it has its audience. It's like the people that enjoy the more traditional kind of fantasy, the epic fantasy stuff, that they know what they want and they'll get that, but it's not like the legion of romance readers.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would feel the other way around. Like, I feel the weight of like high, like epic fantasy is like there are very specific expectations when it comes to epic fantasy. I feel where like with romance, it's a little more junk food.
Well, one of the things that really intimidates me when I think about like I think every author at some point when they get into the market they see what's happening with romance they're like could I write that and they're like trying to think of that and one of the things that really intimidates me is the expectations around tropes and around specific subgenres like in my books in my epic fantasy books and it's common within the genre that I have a lot of plot twists. I subvert
Mhm.
expectations a lot. I have a
Mhm.
lot of things that will be red herrings that'll lead the reader along one path and it'll suddenly be something else. And that's something that I really enjoy writing. And I know with most romance, there are specific tropes that if you promote a book as having that trope and then you
Mm.
subvert it, you get into
Mm.
big trouble with some readers.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. I mean, I think we all have, like we started at the beginning of this podcast, our strengths and our weaknesses when it comes to writing, when it comes to marketing, when it comes to creating our brands as authors. And I do like to subvert tropes and I
Yeah,
do like to twist expectations. And I think I found a reader base that likes that as well. You know what I
that's
mean?
great. Yeah, that's excellent that you're able to do that. I just always imagine if I tried getting into it, I would end up with folks who want just like the straightforward thing, like exactly what they want from the trope. And then if I deviate from that, I can just see my Goodreads average going.
Yeah, yeah. Well, out of everything that we've talked about so far, what do you think the biggest lesson that would be helpful to our audience would be?
Yeah, so I think if like given the type of marketing that I found success with, marketing myself, I think it's important to market yourself if you're doing that, to market yourself as a brand, to do it authentically, to do it consistently, and know what your message is, sort of what the vibe you're putting out is. I have on my social media, on my profile, on all accounts, at the top of it, it says, "Be kind, be generous, and have empathy." And
Mm.
that's the vibe that I try to put out with helping people with writing, with publishing, with all that sort of thing, and that's what I support as my brand. So I think it doesn't have to be that. It could um, be mean, be a jerk, and you have to be consistent to it. And it's almost like playing a character at that point. But I think being consistent with what you put out there is important. And I think also one thing that's important to think about when you're marketing things, as well as when you're writing and creating stuff, is that the author themselves, you yourself, are the most important thing you bring to the table.
Mm.
Like 20 different people can write a book following the same story about a dragon shifter having
Mm.
romance or something like that. It could be
Mm.
the same story, but the unique voice and the unique take that each separate author brings to it brings a humanity to it that translates into the marketing, that translates into the community you build around your author brand. And so I think people usually don't feel like they have something unique to say or that they are particularly interesting, but they are. Really, the individual author is the most important part of the overall equation when it all comes together.
Yes.
And yeah, yeah. And one more thing that I made a note here, I didn't want to forget to say this, is when you're marketing on social media, things can get a little bit wild on there. There's always some kind of drama going on. There's
Yes.
always something that people have very strong opinions going on. And I have watched people try different kinds of things. I've watched people dive into the drama. I've watched people have opinions, have takes, all that kind of stuff. The one consistent thing that I've seen is if you go in and you put out negative energy, if you get really angry about something, if you market yourself in a sad way, if you market yourself as nobody's buying my books, nobody this and that, you can get a lot of attention really quickly with that, but it's not sustainable. It's a sort of emotional jolt that you give to the viewers, to the readers, that they will pay attention to you momentarily, but they won't hold on to you. If you put out something where you can be a resource to the community, where you can bring something positive, where you can be helpful to people, where you can bring something that makes people feel better when they see your name show up, that's a lot more sustainable than just trying to grab on to the topic of the moment and make that the thing that causes people to pay attention to you.
I love that you bring that up because I was thinking about that when you were talking about be consistent in your brand voice too,
Yeah.
because people often ask me about the either rage bait or the pity bait that exists out there in the world. And I
Mhm.
do think it is possible to build a brand off of pity. Like one
Yeah.
of my best examples of that is the ASPCA.
Oh, that's true.
Where like the Sarah McLaughlin's playing in the background and you're like crying over this poor little wet kitten that's on the screen. You know what I mean? And so it is
Yeah.
possible to create a like sustaining brand based out of pity, but you really have to commit to the bit in order
Yeah.
for it to be long lasting.
Yeah, and it feels like that would just be so mentally and emotionally exhausting for you to
Yes.
stay with that long term. Because I mean, I've had times when I feel down, I've had times when I feel up, and it feels much better to be up than
Yes.
down down, and I don't think it's a good idea to. I mean, it works for ASPCA, it works for like that kind of thing, but they have an ongoing sort of critical need for something. But when people are reading books, a lot of times they do want to read a book that makes them feel sad, or they want to feel something, but they want to feel like some sort of emotional fulfillment when they read a
Yes.
book. And if all they get ongoing is sadness or rage or something like that, I feel like, and I've observed from other people that that doesn't ongoing pull people in and doesn't hold them there. It'll pull them in momentarily, but it won't hold them there. And like I was saying, I don't think that's sustainable for an author to do just ongoing. I feel like people would burn out doing that because you kind of have to enjoy what you're doing if you're going to do it long term over the course of a career. You have to get some personal fulfillment out of that. And I feel like it's hard to do that if you are making yourself be angry all the time or you're making yourself be sad all the time.
Yeah, because I think that's why people consume books and stories in the first place, is to
Mhm.
feel emotions and
Yep.
to have some sort of closure to the emotions. You know,
Yeah.
that's when the book ends, we have some sort of closure, we have some sort of redemption, we have some sort of hope or next steps or happily ever after. Whatever it is, that's I think why we consume stories is because our lives, our human lives, don't necessarily come with closure at the end of a book in our lives. And so I think stories provide us with that. And so as author brands, we also have to provide that for our readers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have said a lot on my TikTok videos that I think of stories as being vehicles to emotion, that it's the story is always just in the service of bringing some kind of emotion to the reader, and it's important to be intentional and aware of what emotion you're trying to bring. I hadn't specifically thought of it in terms of providing the closure as well, so that's a great thing that I'm going to be thinking about after this.
I read that a lot, and I help people with their manuscripts before they've been published a lot with the work that I do. And I read that a lot when people are self-inserting their own emotional or trauma journeys into the
Mhm.
stories that they're writing, is if the writer themselves hasn't come to at least a plateau in their healing journey, if not a point of closure in their healing journey, it's very hard for them to provide that for their characters. And
Yeah.
so a lot of these stories end up just being trauma dumping, for lack of better terms. And I think that that doesn't provide the reader with that sense of accomplishment or completion or whatever at the end of the story.
Right, right. And that's not to say that there needs to be a bow tied on every plot thread or something like
Sure.
that, but it's the and I feel like there's a separation, there's a difference between the plot and then the emotional journey. The emotional journey does need that closure like you're talking about, and that's a great point.
Well, anything else you want to add before we start wrapping things up, coming to a point of closure
Coming to a point of closure, that I love the segue there.
here?
I think we've covered everything that I had in mind today, and it's been so much fun talking with you about this.
Yeah, I mean, I love just hearing about people's journeys because they are all unique in this. And when people come to me with the marketing question, they expect me to be like, do X, and that will like solve all of their problems. It's the magic pill, so on and so forth. And I'm like, well, it depends.
Right, right. And the same thing that worked for one person won't necessarily work for the other person. So it's always just a process of sort of trial and error.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's so many different ways to find success as an author. And it goes back to what your goals for success as an author are. And I think that that's also worth underlining.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Well, this is powerful stuff that we're talking about here, per usual. An audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts, feelings, stories, insights, histories with us as well. We'd love to know how strategies and journeys like these have impacted you in your own writing careers. And please do let us know if you have any questions. We'd be happy to answer them. We throw a lot of jargon around in these podcasts. And if you're like, hello, I need a glossary. Please do let us know. We're happy to answer your questions. Special thanks to Jason for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so please comment, like, subscribe below. Check out Linktree/Claire Joyance for my links. And then where can folks find out more about you?
Yeah, my books are available pretty much anywhere. Amazon's probably the easiest place to find them. I also sell signed books on TikTok Shop, and I do a lot of events in the Southeast United States. My website is just my name, Jason Dorough, Doroughg.com. And on social media, I'm most active on TikTok and on Threads. But as we talked about, I'm also on Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff.
Awesome, awesome. Well, until next time, please remember that you all have extraordinary stories to share, and we're rooting for you as you use them to change the world for the better. Take care, everyone.